Namaskar Bharat. Here today, Dr. Manan Gandhi, MD, is a professional Ayurveda practitioner and a physician for a major disease and a master in pulse diagnosis, having won six consecutive national level awards. He is also the youngest Ayurvedic doctor to have a published paper in the international journals. He has given a various keynote addresses in major conferences internationally and is an expert panelist on various websites. His passion lies in spreading the deep knowledge Ayurveda, one home at a time. He is also an expert panelist on Republic TV, India News TV, and also TEDx speaker. Now I will request to Manan sir to hand over to you on today's topic. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I really hope I am audible to everyone and there is no sound issue from my end.
Yes, sir.
Right. So, to start off, I think let me just introduce what I'm going to talk about today because there are multiple subjects that I could speak about, but let's just focus on what today's scenario is. Today's scenario is something that probably no one has ever seen in their lifetime. What is happening in the world with this new virus, that is novel virus that is coming in, and the efforts that all the governments across the world are taking to challenge it and to try and either cure it or to suppress it or to find a vaccine to prevent the further spread. So what Ayurveda has as a role, and there are multiple messages that all of you all are also getting over WhatsApp. There's so much information bombardment that's happening. Is the last thing that I want to do is add on to it. So what I'll do here is I'll try to make it as clear cut as possible for all of you, so you all exactly know what you are doing and why you're doing so. All right. The first thing then we talk about COVID-19 is to understand what kind of a virus it is. Okay. It's basically a virus that is affecting your respiratory system. Before we delve a little bit deeper into that, because I think most of you all know almost everything, but I'll go into what Ayurveda has in store for this. The beauty of Ayurveda, it has a concept called Prakriti. How many of you all know? I can barely see actually anyone here, but if you can probably use the chat. How many of you all have heard of Prakriti and how many of you all haven't?
Sir, actually, I have muted everyone, sir.
Everyone has heard of Prakriti. All right. So, you know what the beauty of Prakriti is? Prakriti is a concept that is an Ayurvedic concept which says that every individual is unique. Which means that if I were to ask a question in this group saying how many of you all, no matter what you do, are unable to gain weight, I'll have quite a few hands up. And if I ask you the same question, no matter what you do, you're unable to lose weight, I'll probably have even more hands up, which means that every single person is unique. Every single person is genetically different. They have different genetic codes, that different uh, what susceptibility to diseases. Some people keep getting acidity, some people keep getting a gas problem, some people have constipation issues, some people get loose motions very easily. Every single person is unique. Now, when every single person is unique, how do you treat an individual? So there are two methods that you can go about. Method number one is what allopathy does, is called as a shotgun method. Why do we call it a shotgun method? Is because it's one size fits all. Here you don't actually treat the individual at all. What you do is you treat the disease. For example, if an individual suppose suffers from fever, so I will be giving a medicine for fever. I will not be giving a message for Dr. Murli or for Vinod or for Rajat. I'll be giving a medicine for fever. What happens here is that because every fever is being given the same medicine, even if the medicine is of the highest quality possible, some of them, let's say about 20% or 15% of the population, will not be suitable for this medicine and they'll have some sort of a reaction, which we could call as an unwanted effect or a negative effect or a side effect. This has been true for almost all the systems of treatments where they've applied the first method, which is shotgun method. I'm not going into too much detail, you already understand most of this. The second method that is employed is the individualistic method, where you look at a person as an individual, you analyze, how it, what kind of what kind of medicines and drugs will suit him, what kind of a diet he needs. You understand his problems. You understand, what kind of a background, what kind of a geographical condition, etc. he comes from, and you give him the medicine that actually works for him, specifically for him. It is impossible to do the second way. The reason why it is impossible is because there are so many parameters of an individual that it is impossible in one lifetime for you to understand each and every one of them. So if I were to treat an individual in an individualistic fashion, I have absolutely no method to do so whatever. And herein comes the beauty of Prakriti. When we look at science, and especially when we're looking at chemistry, one of the greatest achievements in humankind was the formation of the periodic table. I'm sure most of you all know what the periodic table is. It is a specific arrangement of elements in specific rows and columns. And the beauty of the periodic table, and why is this arrangement, so popular? Why is it one of the biggest breakthroughs in the field of chemistry or science? Is because of the simple fact that when you know where the element lies, you can predict how it behaves by actually having a test of another element which lies in either the same row or same column. Which means if I know one element in that row, I can predict how all the other elements will react based on that one element. Which means it saves so much time and effort for me to test every single element on every single scientific study, that I actually am able to figure out simply by that arrangement. And that's the brilliance of the periodic table. Why is this so important? Is because Ayurveda has done exactly this. What it's done is that it is classified the entire individual, what you could call is the individual parameters, into these kind of classification or columns, which are 7 in nature. There is a Vata Prakriti, there is a Pitta Prakriti, there is a Kapha Prakriti, and there are combinations Vat, Pitta, Vat, Kapha, Pitta, Kapha, and there is Sama, which means all three together. Now you don't need to get into what is Vat, what is Pitta, what is Kapha, or all the Sanskrit. There's absolutely no need for you to get into so much detail. What you need to understand is what your Prakriti is, or in which category you come in. Which means that if you know where your element comes in the periodic table, you can predict how you will react or how you will behave to different stimulus, different medicines, different herbs, different weathers, different thoughts, uh, different stimulations, be it mental, spiritual, emotional, etc. When you know your Prakriti, or when you know your genetic predisposition, and that is the beauty of Ayurveda, that is the beauty of Prakriti. The only way you can treat an individual and not a disease is by understanding that individual. And the only realistic method to understand the individual without going into absolute detail of who and what exactly he is by classifying him in the Prakriti. Now, why am I taking so much time to explain this entire concept of Prakriti? Is simply because what you are reading and what you are seeing today on WhatsApp or on TV or in various other medias is that there is this one medicine that X or Y or Z has recommended that boosts immunity. Now, that is the most ridiculous thing that you could come up with. Why is it ridiculous? Is because it cannot work in a shotgun method. Immunity is not as simple as you think it is. And boosting immunity, this entire concept of boosting immunity, is not so simple. For example, most of these anti-COVID boosters or kadas are basically things that are garam masala in water. These are the kadas that you're getting nowadays, right? If I were to simply ask you a question based out of common sense, is that a person who's suffering from an ulcer or who's suffering from acidity wants to prevent himself from getting COVID, if he has all the garam masalas you can think of, sunt, black pepper, tulsi, methi, all the heaty things together, boils it in a kada, and drinks and eats all these heaty things 2 times a day, what do you think is going to happen to that individual? He's going to suffer big time. And trust me, the amount of acidity patients I'm seeing these days is ridiculous. Everyone is suffering from acidity because everyone is doing these kadas. The second thing, a person who's suffering from a cough disease, basically who has a runny nose, or someone who has some kind of a mucus related problem. It could be, a lot of, it could be a sore throat with a lot of mucuses there. It could be something like tonsillitis or something similar, or maybe he has a tendency of catching a cold very frequently. He starts taking Himalaya Giloy. He starts taking Himalaya Neem tablets, which is the most common thing that I'm finding here. These are very cooling things. They increase the cold, but they reduce the acidity and the heat in the body. What do you think is going to happen to that person? He's actually going to contract a cold, which is what he was trying to fight for. So the entire concept that immunity is a generalistic term that can be shotgunned and applied to every single person with one formulation, in itself, the principle of that thought is flawed, which is the first point that I wanted to make today. Where Ayurveda comes in here is Ayurveda does not treat diseases, it treats individuals. I've said that quite often in these 15 minutes. But what I'm trying to tell you is the first thing you need to do is understand your own Prakriti. And what I'm going to be doing, and I'm not going to be doing it right now for a particular reason, is I will send you a link online. I don't own that website, it's just someone's website I stumbled across, which has a beautiful test that you can do yourself. Just answer about 10, 15, 20 odd questions and figure out what your Prakriti is. It probably may not be 100% foolproof, but you'll still get an overall idea of what your Prakriti is. Once you figure out what your Prakriti is, I will be giving you a list of home remedies that you can actually do depending on what your Prakriti is to boost immunity for yourself. So today's talk, first of all, I don't want it to be a monologue, but I feel somehow I think today's talk is going to be a monologue. I would really prefer a dialogue. So if you all want to write something or want to, ask some questions, one of you all has already done so. Please feel free to use the chat. I would love a response. I can't see all, but I'm sure you all are listening to me and I'll have some kind of a dialogue here. But there's a theory aspect to this and there's a practical aspect to this. So when you understand the theory aspect, I will also help you out with a few practical aspects here. So I think I'm clear with what I want you to understand when it comes to coronavirus is that do what is right for you, which may or may not be right for the person sitting next to you. Understand your individuality and your Prakriti, and you can simply take that remedy. Okay. Now, going on further, when we're talking about how we can deal or what the current geopolitical scenario is when it's coming to coronavirus and the treatments with regards to different modalities of treatment, today it's very fortunate for someone like me whose mission is to get people aware about what our ancient science and what of Ayurveda is. It's not mumbo jumbo. It's not as simplistic as people generally make it out to be or as think. And it's a very, very deep and a very, very complex science, because if it is a brother or a sister of yoga, and if it is as deep as yoga, then earlier how we used to laugh at yoga and say this is ridiculous. Today, yoga is the number one practiced form of physical regimen in the entire world. It's not gymming, it's nothing else. All these things did last for a number of years, I think about 80, 100 years, even though it still continues with different gyms. But today also you're finding that number one has come back to yoga. And I'm pretty confident a lot of Indian medical systems like Ayurveda, Siddha will eventually start taking their place. May not be the main system of treatment, but it will show how much value it has to add. And other beautiful sciences of India like Sanskrit, etc., should also start coming up to the forefront in the near future to show how much more scientific and how much more value it can add. Let me, is it possible to have more of a conversation? I would really like to answer more questions, and in the process of answering, tell you a little bit more on Ayurveda, on dietetics, and on different myths. Is it possible to do that?
So then I have to unmute everyone, every participant.
Can we do that?
Then
I
it
would
will
really
create the
prefer to have.
disturbance.
It'll create a disturbance. Can people ask me on
Yeah.
the chat? That would be. I would really like to have a conversation with you rather than going on.
I will request the participant to drop the message in the chat box.
Right.
It will convenient to you, sir, because it will create the disturbance.
Okay. So I have gotten one message from two people about ulcerative colitis and can it be effectively treated in Ayurveda. So when we're talking about diseases, I think that will exclude a lot of people who have no interest of listening to this disease. But I think I'll just answer that question in a very simple way. Ulcerative colitis is an autoimmune disease. And when I'm talking about an autoimmune disease, what happens here is we need to understand autoimmune disease in a sort of depth. I think I had given this answer in Z News as well when I was interviewed for an autoimmune disease, and I have a very very different take on such kind of diseases compared to what a conventional take is. It'll take a while for me to answer that question, but I'll probably try to keep it as simplistic and as short as possible. Uh, Autoimmune disease is is basically a disease which is caused due to a very deep level of fracture within the body, which means I'll share the website. I'll share the website on the Prakriti. Autoimmune disease is basically a disease that is caused by a fracture within the body. Uh, we have we have multiple aspects in the human body. Uh, One of which is what we call as ahankar or ego, a fraudulent ego that we normally refer to. What happens is that a lot of times, if there are doctors here in the group, they can probably reflect on the fact and probably agree with me here, is when I see people who are suffering from any sort of autoimmune diseases, they are people who are normally at war with themselves. Every cell of our body is intelligent. Every cell is able to identify which system it is in. For example, every cell is doing multiple functions for survival, multiple reactions for survival of its own structure or of its own cells, multiple reactions at the same time for survival of the tissue, multiple reactions for the organ, multiple survival reactions for the organism to survive. The same cell structure that is present in different organs knows its particular job. So intelligence is present in every single cell, and that intelligence is uh, is basically in different layers. I'm not going into every single layer, but one of the layers is identification. For example, when you were born, you were probably about 3 or 4 kilos, maybe even lesser, maybe even more, right? You were this much. Today, some of you all are 5 feet, 6 feet. What changed in your body that you grew from a mere 2 3 kilo kid who was this tall to someone who is now 5 and 6 kilos? What you did was very simple. You ate food and you drank water. You had some sort of a nutrition. So basically what you've done is that you've taken something that is not yourself. When I ask you who are you, you will say you I am everything that is under the skin, including my skin. Anything that is beyond my skin is not me. That's how you understand your body. But when you're eating, say, a bhindi, that bhindi isn't me. But once it gets digested, now it becomes me. So what changed? When you look at the process of digestion, what is happening is that there is I don't want to go into too much detail, but there is an entrainment of frequency when you're absorbing these ingredients. Suddenly those ingredients are recognized by your body as a part of you. They are being absorbed. And when they are being absorbed, they become a part of you. And when they become a part of you, the cells automatically identify that, hold on, this is not an alien particle. This is actually a part of me. And that is where the cells have the intelligence of recognizing whether that component of the body is alien or it's a part of you. In an autoimmune disease, the cells fail to recognize that. So it's a fracture of ahankar. Why that fracture happens and how we need to treat it is a completely is a. I told you it's a very long answer. I'm sorry to elongate it very to elongate it too much. But let me keep it very simple. Autoimmune disease and cancers are actually brothers and sisters, right? In both the cases, It's basically like a riot that takes place inside a nation between the citizens of the nations. That's exactly what's happening in both the cases. In an autoimmune disease and in a cancerous disease, there are two factions that are at war. It could be a very small faction that's breaking away from the bigger faction, or it could be a very large faction which is where it starts becoming malignant and spreading. It's basically now what Maoists are doing to India, right? It's like a fraction that is at war within itself. So that is how Ayurveda looks at autoimmune diseases. So there have been multiple studies on autoimmune diseases being treated by meditation and yoga, wherein you actually try to reach the deep ends of the mind, trying to repair and mend those kind of ego fractures or ahankar fractures that is to be done. And a lot of Ayurveda medicines in this regard can help. But if you think that Ayurveda medicine by itself can treat an autoimmune disease without having the mind involved, it is impossible. You are a body mind complex. Your body and mind are not two separate entities. They are very much connected. And if you want to treat diseases like cancers or like autoimmune diseases when caught in an early stage, you can treat them provided that your body and mind are treated together. Okay, so I don't want to get into too much details here, but I hope I have answered your question
Sorry to
to the best
interrupt
of
you.
my abilities. Yeah.
I'm unmuting everyone. So they will ask the question in case they want to
I
ask
think
the
I
question.
already have quite a few questions here.
And it was,
Homeopathic, yeah, sure, you can unmute. I'm sure you
yeah,
can do that.
so it will very
Homeopathic
easy.
and Ayurvedic, both medicines can be taken together. Okay, so that's the question. So in okay, I think I'm getting a lot of noise. I think it's better to just mute everyone.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. So going on further, let me just answer the other question of what Subhash ji has asked me. Uh, the difference between homeopathy and Ayurveda is very, very simple. Okay. And this is very, very interesting because a lot of people ask me that if I were to go into so-called alternative medicine, I don't consider Ayurveda as alternative, but that's my opinion. If I want to get into so-called alternative medicine, when should I go into homeopathy? When should I go into Ayurveda? And are they both, synergistic, or are they and counterproductive when we take both of them together? Let me answer this question very simply. Homeopathy and Ayurveda, in most of the senses, give you the exact same medicine. Okay, there's an example that I came across. When you have a cold, right? So we give a medicine which is called Vatsanap. Vatsanap is a plant, in Latin is called Aconitum ferox. What the homeopaths would give for the same condition is aconite, which is basically just the active principle of the same herb. So in essence, we're actually giving you the same medicine. The homeopath is giving you the absolute same herb that the Ayurvedic doctor is giving you. So what is the difference? The difference is this. The homeopaths and the Ayurveda have a difference in principle. Homeopaths believe that an active principle should be extracted from the herb, isolated and strengthened by making it either into tinctures and giving it in those kind of sense to give you a higher effect on a smaller dose. That is what the homeopathy principle revolves around. The Ayurvedic principle revolves around giving the herb as a whole without chemicalizing it or removing one kind of a active principle and negating all the others. Because in Ayurveda, what we believe is that when you're giving the herb as a whole, for example, I give haldi as haldi and I don't remove curcumin from it. When you're giving the herb as a whole, the other contents of the herb, which may not be the active principle or the principle that is working, are responsible for ensuring that this herb does not have a negative or an unwanted effect. Which is why in Ayurveda we use whole herbs. We don't use extracts. There are benefits and there are pros and cons in both theories, and I'll explain what the pros and cons are. The pro to homeopathy is that if you are giving the extract, then you don't have to worry too much about the purity of the herb. The con here is that if you're chemicalizing that herb, you're no longer actually taking a all natural ingredient, but you're taking a chemical which is susceptible to have side effects or have an effect where it can actually cause an overdose to a great extent. The pro with Ayurveda is if you're giving a herb, you know that you have a very high quality of safety because the herb itself is not going to give you a side effect. But the con is if the herb is not well sourced, or if the herb is not well washed, or not well processed, if you're getting a tablet out of it, then you could actually suffer from unwanted effects only due to the fact of purity. So when given in an absolutely correct manner, Ayurveda supersedes homeopathy, because if it's given in a correct manner, Ayurveda will never have a negative effect. But the negative part of Ayurveda again is that you'll have to take a bigger quantity of tablet because you're not extracting a kind of a herb. That is the first difference of Ayurveda and homeopathy. Again, I know I'm diverting from the question. The question is, homeopathic and Ayurveda can be taken simultaneously, no questions asked. It is absolutely okay. I'm a big fan of homeopathy because I know they're doing the same thing that we're doing. The second con that I find in homeopathy, I've given two cons of Ayurveda. The second con I find of homeopathy is that they use medicines in alcoholic preparations more often than not. I am not an expert in homeopathy, so correct me if there's an homeopath in the panel here. But they used more of alcoholic preparations in homeopathic medicines. And when the benefit of using alcoholic preparations is that that medicine spreads before digestion. But the negative impact of this kind of a spread is that there's a lot of difficulty in targeting. I'll give you a very simple example when I'm talking about targeting. There are medicines in Ayurveda which we give in the ghee form. I'm sure you all have heard of Triphala Grith, Yashti Madhu Grith, X ka ghee, Y ka ghee, different herbs that are used in ghee forms. Now, the beauty of this ghee form is this. The way you manufacture something in a ghee form is that you will take the herb and you'll make it into a kada. When you're making it into a kada, only the water soluble aspect of that herb will be present. Everything else will precipitate. Then you're taking this kada, which already has the water soluble part, and you're putting it in ghee and you're actually burning off the water. So the only thing that will remain in the ghee will be the contents that will be both water soluble as well as fat soluble. Which means if I am to administer such medicines, that medicine will be able to permeate your body much quicker than any medicine or any mode of treatment possible. Why is that? It's because your cell membrane can only be permeated by things that are fat soluble. And the nucleus in your cell can only be permeated by things that are water soluble. So if I make medicines in these kind of formulations, they will be able to permeate much quicker, much deeper into areas that these kind of alcoholic preparations will not be able to. So there are limitations when it comes to permeability, but to take nothing away from homeopathy, it's a brilliant science. It is also a part of Ayurveda that the Germans, it's common knowledge, have taken from Ayurveda and they've developed it. Side effects of Ayurvedic, definitely there can be side effects of Ayurveda, but not in the way that you think they are. Allow me to explain the definition of a side effect or an unwanted effect. Side effect of Ayurveda, which means that if the medicine is the correct medicine for the person, if given correctly, if the purity is maintained, if everything is right, and then the patient has a negative impact, that is what a side effect is. That will never happen in Ayurveda. Ayurveda will not have side effects. But if the medicine is wrong, if it's not meant for that individual, if the purity is a problem, if there's something mixed into it, or if the person has an allergic reaction, which means it's not right for the individual, and then he has a problem, that is not a side effect. That is a mistake by the doctor or by the medicine, right? So Ayurveda does not have side effects when you're looking at the correct definition of side effects. We are both followers of Ayurvedic medicine, but practical problems of diet and restrictions in food and preparation of kada are the solutions to this. The advancement in Ayurveda is phenomenal. You're actually having soft chews that are having kadas inside those kind of soft chews. In fact, you don't need to take those kadwa kadas. You can simply swallow the soft chews. They'll burst into your system and they're going to give you the exact kada. So there are beautiful delivery methods where you don't have to do all these efforts. They are very easily done and available for you. They're actually having premix packets where you can simply just take the packet, boil it and take it on the go, like how you have your tea and coffee as well. So you don't need to worry about it. There are practical problems have been dealt with to a great extent. I don't agree that diet is a practical problem when it comes to Ayurveda, for the very simple reason that when we're talking about a disease, for example, I have a cold. I can't take sardi ki dawai and go out and have an ice cream. You need to have a amount of restriction in your diet because it can't contradict your medicines. So diet has to be a part of medicine. The entire concept that you can have whatever diet you want as long as you take the medicine only works in suppressive treatment. I am sorry, I don't want to normally come out to be a little bit aggressive, but in this particular stance, the reason why I'm going to be aggressive right now is because I truly believe the fact, and you can think over it without keeping my so-called probably visible arrogance that you will see in my next statement, is that I have yet to see any single disease except for surgical interventions being treated by allopathy that would not have gotten cured on its own. You can name any disease. If there are doctors here, I please open the panel to you. You can please give me one disease that would not have gotten cured on its own, but by conservative treatment, allopathic medicine. In fact, allopathic medicine itself is known as conservative, not curative. But by treatment of an allopathic medicine, that is completely eliminated, which would not have been eliminated had no treatment been done. Why is that? Is because any disease, for example, diabetes, thyroid, um, any such diseases that don't go on its own, they basically have to be suppressed for life. I'm not taking anything from allopathy. I think had it not been there, humanity would have suffered big time. It's extremely important for it to be there. But the reality is that you could either suppress a problem or you could cure a problem. And a lot of times we as laymen confuse the why to the how. For example, if I were to ask you that I have a runny nose, why do I have a runny nose? The doctor will tell you, you know what? You're having excessive mucus production in your sinuses. That mucus is clogging up your sinuses, so you have a sinus problem. Is that a why or is that a how? That is the how. And we assume that, wait, now I know it's the how. So they treat the how. And when you treat the how, you're suppressing the symptom. No one really answered the why. If I have pain in my finger, right? If I take a painkiller, that's not really curing it, that's suppressing it. And I'm sure all of you will agree and know the fact. Why do I have an increased production? You can go into more chemistry. You can want to know whether this cell is overactive because of this particular hormone or because of this particular enzyme. But if I still continue asking you, why is this enzyme produced more? Eventually you'll find out that it's only how, and how. Ayurveda is very capable of providing you with the why. But the why that Ayurveda provides you is not always physical. Because in Ayurveda, we consider that you are not only made up of the physical body, you are made up of actually three bodies: the Sthul Sharir, Sukshma Sharir, and Karan Sharir. And a lot of things come from there. But that's going to be a later conversation. I'm not getting into that detail. So, which is why Ayurveda can answer the why, which is why it's always been famous historically to be treating diseases from the root cause. When you're treating diseases from the root cause, the chances of the recurrence is very, very less, because then you have to work extremely hard to reform the root cause for the disease to come back. That's the great part of Ayurveda. Thank you. Can UC be effectively treated by Ayurveda? Yes, it can be treated by Ayurveda, but it's going tali dono hath se bajegi. It's not going to be by medicines alone. Understand this. Diseases are formed by 4 factors. There are actually 5 factors. I'm not considering the fifth, but I will mention it. Diseases are formed by 4 factors. And not a single science that I have come across, and I know at least 200 medical, paramedical, healing systems and sciences that deals with all 4 of them. If you know of them, please correct me if I'm wrong. The first is ahar. Ahar means diet. If you have a wrong diet, it's going to cause diseases. I don't have to tell you this, it's obvious, right? The second is vihar. Vihar is your surroundings. So, for example, you'll know have people who have problems the minute there is a weather change. They can't stand too much heat. They can't stand too much cold. Humidity causes problems. Pollen causes problems. So the surroundings causes diseases, obviously. The third is achar. Achar means your regimen. I mean, if you over exercise, if you don't exercise, they're going to cause problems. It's obvious. And the fourth is vichar. Vichar is your thoughts. If your thought patterns will also cause diseases. So ahar, vihar, achar, and vichar are 4 factors that cause diseases either individually or together. You will have a person who will say, you know what, I am a dietitian, I can cure diabetes for you. Just follow my diet. But what if the diabetes is stress related? Can the ahar treatment cure it? It can't. We go to Bihar. So people will say, you know what, I have color therapy. I'll put you in a surrounding, or I'll put you in an area where you can, be in a hut or be in X or Y or Z. And if I change or manipulate your surroundings, I can cure you with vihar. But that in itself is inadequate. The third is achar, which means you'll have a yoga instructor or someone who'll probably tell you that, you know what, do this problem, and your arthritis problem will be gone. It will help you, no doubt. But what if that's because of a false diet? It doesn't work there. The fourth is vichar. So you'll have psychotherapists, you'll have psychiatrists, you'll have counselors, you'll have a lot of people or hypnotic treatments who will tell you, if I get your thoughts corrected, you'll be okay. But who do you have who works on all four factors together? Is there a single modality of treatment present that will tell you, listen, if you really want to get well, let's address all four issues together? Ahar. Ayurveda will always give you a diet along with its treatment. Vihar. It will always tell you that you have to take particular measures with regards to climate. We have something called as Rutucharya. Rutucharya is every season or every Rutu, you have to do different things. There is a time of the day, so every time of the day you have to do different things. Dinacharya, Ratricharya. The third is Achar. Achar means what you need to do. So the entire aspect of yoga comes in. Yoga, pranayam, you will obviously be given all of these by an Ayurvedic doctor. And the fourth is Vichar. So an Ayurvedic doctor will always counsel you on what kind of thought patterns have been affected, because in every disease of either Vata, Pitta, Kapha, a single thought is mentioned in almost every disease, that this kind of thinking can also cause this particular disease. So which is why when you're covering all the four, the chances of you getting better is high, because you really are not able to pinpoint which point or which of these four factors caused the disease, or which two factors or which three factors, or whether all four factors caused the disease. There is also a fifth factor which I will mention but not go into details, and that is karma, without which none of these four factors will work. You could actually be absolutely fine with your ahar, vihar, achar, vichar and be hit by a truck. So that is karma, right? But I'm not getting into too many details of this. So diet has to be a crucial part. That's not impractical. That is absolutely necessary. In Ayurveda, Panchakarma Kriya is good to do every year as a cleaning process. So when we're talking about Panchakarma, for people who don't know, Panchakarma is a detoxification process where you're clearing out the doshas of the body, of Vata, Pitta and Kapha. There are two kinds of Panchakarma that are to be done. The first Panchakarma is for a person who is diseased. That is to be done at any given point, when he's diseased, he needs that Panchakarma and to be given. And there is one Panchakarma which you correctly have written, that is to be done by a person for maintenance of health. Ayurveda always believes in immunity building, prophylaxis, prevention of diseases more than simply cure of it. So it's more of prevention better than cure kind of a scenario. And Ayurveda Panchakarma Kriya is absolutely a great way to do it. I personally do it almost every year, and I'm pretty young to say, but that's been one of the great reasons responsible, I do believe, for good health of me and my family. The next, how do you know your Prakriti? I'm going to share a link that'll probably go a long way in explaining what Prakriti is and how you can find your Prakriti out. Can arthritis be cured by Ayurveda? In fact, it's brilliant to know that 90% of people who come with arthritis to me or to probably an Ayurvedic doctor other than me are people who don't want to get operated. So they come as a last stage. We've successfully cured a lot of people with arthritis who, fortunately for them, don't have to undergo surgery at the current moment. But that doesn't mean that every single person who will come to me will be magically cured. That doesn't work like that. But as a disease, arthritis absolutely can be cured by Ayurveda. No question about it. Right. Is there any other question, or should I talk about a bit about diet? Because I think I have touched the subject, and I can actually talk about a multitude of subjects, whatever ones that you're all interested in.
You can continue for diet.
Sure. So let me just tell you a little bit about diet. Let me tell you about a very interesting thing that I have just spoken about in one of my conferences, of how the ridiculousness of what is going on today in terms of diet. There are 8 factors when it comes to diet. I'm going to be highlighting only one of them, but mentioning all the 8 here, which we don't think about. It's common sense, but we don't think about. And let me simply state those factors. Let's take the Indian cultural aspect to understand this slightly better. Any Punjabis here? Anyone who's from Punjab? I would have normally said raise your hands, but can't see anyone of you. Anyone from Punjab? Anyone who do you know what kind of a diet do you expect from a Punjabi? You would have you would have things like makke di rotis, right? Sarson da sags. You'd have things like that. Do you know how heavy makke di roti is to digest? It's extremely heavy. You have like 3, 4 makke di rotis in Bombay and you'll figure it out. It's extremely heavy to digest. But that's what they have in Punjab, and they're absolutely fine with it. They're able to digest that kind of heavy food. Why? Is because they're pretty far away from the equator as well as the ocean. I'll explain the importance of that when we go further. When I went to Amritsar, I had gone in the winters. I actually managed to eat 5 huge aloo parathas for breakfast. It is impossible for me to have 5 aloo parathas in any given point of time in the day normally, but I could actually manage to do that when I was there in the winters. Because when you go there, your appetite actually increases. I'm not sure if you all have been there and you all realize that when you go to such a cold kind of an environment, Punjab, Kashmir, these kind of places, you'll be able to digest ridiculous amounts of foods there, which you are not able to do here. When you go down south, let's go to Rajasthan. You will have your Rajasthani food, dal batis, right? So the problem with the Rajasthani people is that they don't put ghee in their food at all. They put their food into the ghee. The amount of ghee they use is ridiculous. So the amount of ghee that is given in the dal bati there is insane. And the reason why it's given like that is simply because the area there is so dry. It's so arid. It's a desert area. So you need that amount of lubrication. And because you need that amount of lubrication there, the amount of ghee intake is higher. But these are also not very easy to digest things. Dals, batis, things like this is not very easy to digest. When you go down south further, you in Gujarat, you'll find that there's still a little bit of the parothas obviously now become rotis, but there's still a bit of a sweet overtone to it. You're still able to digest that kind of heaviness, the gathias, the sweet things. When you go down south further to Maharashtra, you'll find that the roti still remain, but the overtone starts becoming more of spicy. You have more of spices involved to increase the digestive fire and to help digestion. So you're noticing a trend when we're going towards the equator, when you're going down south, at least in India for now, then we'll talk about other continents and other countries. When we're moving towards the equator, and especially when we're also moving towards the coastline, the digestion is becoming lower and lower, and we're having more easier to digest foods. When we're going down south further from, say, Maharashtra, let's ignore Goa for a second, it's too small and insignificant. But let's go down to, say, Karnataka. You'll figure out that now gehu is not digestible. We started with makka, that was in Punjab, and now we're finding even wheat is difficult to digest. In fact, in Bombay also, because we're close to the ocean, you have people who have wheat intolerance and gluten intolerance. But let's go down back to Karnataka. It's only rice and rice products from now on. Let's go down south further. How many of you all have been to Kerala? Anyone? If you all have been to Kerala, or if anyone is a Malayali or a Keralite, you will probably know that there even rice is difficult to digest. So if you go to a traditional Keralian restaurant, you will be served with a red color water along with the thali that you get. That red color water in Ayurveda is known as Shadanga Paniya. I don't know what they call it in Malayali. That is composed of 6 Ayurvedic herbs. That is meant to digest the rice. We started with digesting makke di roti. Now we're having problems digesting rice. Now a person will tell me, you know what, I'm a Punjabi. I live in Tiruvananthapuram or I've recently shifted here. Give me makke di roti and sarson da saag. Do you know what's going to happen to that person? He is going to suffer from a severe amount of indigestion. Indigestion does not mean constipation, by the way. Excretory and digestive systems are completely different. They're related but different. Okay. So it's stupid for a Punjabi to go down to Tiruvananthapuram and say, मैं तो पंजाबी हूँ, मैं क्या करूँ, मैं तो मक्के दी रोटी खाऊंगा. It's equally stupid for a Marwadi to come to Bombay. The humidity levels of a desert area of Rajasthan is negligible, and the humidity of a Bombay is 80% plus. And you're taking the same amount of ghee in your dal bati, assuming that nothing's going to happen for you, and you are a Marwadi by gene, so it's absolutely okay for you to have that amount of ghee wherever you are, is again ridiculous. Jaisa des, vaisa base. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out, that your diet has to be dependent on where you are rather than where you come from, or what culture, or uh, what kind of a belief system you believe in. Now coming to a little bit further, let's take the same example of the Punjabi in Thiruvananthapuram. I think I can't see your faces, but I think most of you all agree with me that obviously the person in Thiruvananthapuram, even if he's a Punjabi, shouldn't be eating makke da roti and sarson da saag as his diet. Let me take it two steps further. Now there was a scientific team that went to Amritsar and that conducted a clinical trial. It could be a single blind, double blind trial, which was absolutely perfectly conducted. And it came up with a paper that said that it is scientifically proven today. Those two magical words, they're called scientifically and proven. It's scientifically proven today that makke di roti and sarson da saag is very good for humans to consume. Now, should that same Punjabi who is in Thiruvananthapuram have the makke di roti and sarson da saag? Because now it's in Times of India. It's in an international research journal. So now, should that diet become magically digestible in Thiruvananthapuram? But it's scientifically proven. If it's scientifically proven, then it has to be digestible anywhere in the globe. Now let me give you another example. How many of you all have kids, or how many of you all have been to, say, Canada or somewhere, Greenland, or areas that are extremely cold? Maybe stayed in some igloo kind of an area or something similar. Very, very cold, snowy kind of areas. Do you know that a pizza in Canada, a regular pizza, is larger than our large pizza that we eat in Bombay? And one skinny, thin guy can eat the entire thing up with a side order of maybe a burger of fries and a big Coke. That same guy who used to live in your home, maybe your kids, or maybe someone from Bombay who shifted there, can now have that entire thing. Wherein when he was here, he used to say, you know what, bhai ek piece lena, I can't finish the entire thing. His appetite was increased so much. So you actually have an example in front of you if you can think about it. So I ask you the same question. Can a person in Ethiopia have the same diet of a person in Japan? It makes no sense. But you know what we do today? Japanese people live the longest. So let's start having Japanese food. I've had patients who've been doing this. In Austria, Vienna, there's a diet that was called intermittent fasting, or keto, sorry. That was called keto diet. Japan was the intermittent fasting one. So the Vienna diet is being followed by every single person in Bombay, every single person in Thiruvananthapuram, in Tamil Nadu, in Kolkata, in Kashmir. That to me is probably the most logic defying thing that I can think of. And that is one part of diet. I told you there are 8 factors. When you decide a diet for you, there are 8 factors you have to take into account. Prakriti, Karan, Sanyog, Rashi, Desha, Kal, Upyukta, Upyog, Sanstha. 8 factors. Prakriti, I've already explained what is suitable to your Prakriti. Karan means processing. You can take the arm and you can process it in different ways. You can have the arm paka hua, and that is going to cause heat in the body. Or you could soak it in water to cause less heat in the body. You could make a arm panna that will reduce the heat in the body. Processing, that changes your food. That is Karan. Sanyog means combinations. You could have different combinations. Of one of the most brilliant combinations I know of when it comes to medicine is haldi with doodh. Haldi when taken alone increases heat in the body, but when taken with something cooling like doodh, it doesn't increase the heat in the body but gives you the other benefits of haldi. That is Sanyog, or combinations. Rashi means quantity. If you have achar this much, you're okay. If you have achar like your sabzi, you're gone. So Rashi. Desh Kal. Desh means which area you're in. I've already explained that in much detail. I can explain every single point in detail, but I don't have so much time. Kal. Kal means which time of the day are you eating your meal? Which time of the season are you eating your meal? And at what age are you eating what meal? That is Kal. So it's 3 different types of Kal. Upyokta is what are your specific allergies? What suits you and what doesn't suit you? And Upyog Sanstha is that when you do eat, there have to be 8 sets of rules that have to be followed for that food to be digested properly. The food has to be warm, hot, it shouldn't be very cold, stale. snigdha, which means slightly unctuous, so it goes down where it can't be absolutely dry. You can't eat a powder for your meal. Ushnam snigdha matravat means absolutely for correct quantity for your palate. Other things, nati dhrutam, nati vilambitam, not too fast, not too slow, without laughing, talking, and with complete concentration. So when you are actually following all 8 aspects, that's when you know what your correct diet is. Not an article written in Times of India from what a person followed in Japan and scientifically tested in Germany. It cannot be your diet. It cannot be the answer to your health. It in itself, the proposition is ridiculous, which is why you need to take a diet from a qualified Ayurvedic person who will assess this. Right. So I think because no one is asking a question, I'm just going on about diet. If there's something that you need to know, please ask me a question. I'm absolutely open to answering each and every question. If you'd like to contradicting me, please contradict me. I can even answer those kind of questions. Can BP be cured with Ayurveda? Brilliant question. I must have cured in the past month of lockdown at least 8 patients who today no longer need any BP medication. And I'm not just saying allopathy, don't even need Ayurvedic BP medication. Okay, we've been curing BP left, right, and center. If you need help with BP, please get in touch with me or any other good Ayurvedic doctor that you know of. It's a very simple medicine. It's not even to be purchased from me. Locally, market se lo, you'll get okay. But you still have to be consulting with me so we know that you're not overdoing or underdoing it. BP is absolutely curable. Some great readings on the subject of Ayurveda. I can recommend a very good book called Prakriti by Robert Swoboda. Okay, I'll write it down. This is a great book. Okay, ignore my spelling mistake. There is no Q there. Spondylitis. Spondylitis in Ayurveda is of 2 different types, and not depending on cervical or lumbar or those kind of, but 2 different root causes of spondylitis. When we identify what kind of spondylitis you have, based on that, the treatment differs for both of these types. Ayurveda can help in spondylitis, in fact, to a great extent. We've been having elite athletes who probably played for the national level, also who have bad backs and sudden spondylitic pains, where we've been able to help them out. We've also been treating India's national judo champions. A lot of people we've helped out with spondylitis. Spondylitis can be helped in Ayurveda for sure. I'm not going into detail of the pathophysiology of spondylitis, but I can talk about what pathophysiology of Ayurveda differs. It differs from homeopathy, it differs from allopathy. One of the national awards that I got was for a breakthrough in asthma treatment. And that was very interesting. If you all are interested, I can actually tell you in about 2 to 5 minutes what that was. In Ayurveda, the root cause of asthma is very different from the root cause that you would get from another pathy like allopathy or homeopathy. They both look at the pathophysiology or the pathogenesis very similarly. Ayurveda here looks at it very differently. Ayurveda says, and I quote in Sanskrit, Adaha pratihator vayu urdhva srota sramashritaha. Now you may not have understood a single word, so let me explain. The peristaltic movement or the vayu that should have gone in the downward direction was being obstructed by either kapha or phlegm or mucus or by arm, which means by indigestion. Okay, indigestion does not mean constipation, I repeat. Causing the vayu to go up. That vayu starts filling up the areas in the lungs and causes asthma with a few. So this is only the first line that I was telling you. There is it's a 8 to 10 like shlok. I'm not going to say the whole shlok and give you every single meaning of every single word here. But the reason why I told you the first line was because Ayurveda understands asthma is a disease that originates in the intestines, not in the lungs. Origination of asthma is in the intestines and manifestation of it is in the lungs. I repeat, origination of asthma is in the intestines and manifestation is in the lungs. So as an Ayurvedic doctor, when I started treating asthmatic patients, what I started doing was I stopped giving medicines for the lungs completely. Most Ayurvedic doctors will still give Mahalakshmi Vilas Ras for asthma to treat the lungs. There are medicines for the lungs in Ayurveda, obviously. But Ayurveda doctors who basically look at a disease from an allopathy perspective and then treat with Ayurveda are somehow don't tend to be too successful. Another example I will probably give you about this, but later. So what I started doing with patients, and I started giving medicines for the stomach, and I found that I was able to cure asthma for many people. And obviously, I love pediatric asthma. That's one of my forte. I can remove pediatric asthma very, very easily. Probably not for everyone. Some patients it's difficult to cure, but I've had a huge success with pediatric asthma for the simple fact that children react to medicines much better. Their bodies are much more easier to deal with than rigidified bodies of people who are pretty old. That doesn't mean I can't treat them, but it takes slightly longer. So I've been able to successfully cure asthma for a lot of patients. Obviously, when I say I have cured in Ayurveda, we don't really cure as doctors. It is nature who cures. We only use nature to help. So that was what landed, fortunately, that award for me as well. But more than the award, the amount of lives that I could touch and change was what was important. And that is what I've been treating the students that come to me for asthma. So it was very interesting to understand that Ayurveda looks at a disease from the root cause. And that's what I was getting to earlier when I was saying that it's not the how that matters, it's the why that matters, right? The problem originating from the stomach, I understand, is also still the how, but there is a why there. I'm not getting into that detail, but it's available in if you can just search for it. Right. I think I've got quite a few questions here. Say something about diabetes. So diabetes is also one of the areas where I've gotten a national award. I can actually tell you with a lot of confidence that I have patients who have been completely cured of diabetes. I know most of the doctors and most of the people here will say, you know what, that's not possible. How can a doctor come and claim that he can cure diabetes? But I am very sorry to say I have. Not for everyone. That's been very, very small, very, very small number of patients that I could have done that. But diabetes can be controlled through natural treatments. There is a difference when I cure diabetes and when you're being cured by the conventional way. And I'll tell you what the difference is. When you're taking allopathic medicines for diabetes, as long as you're taking the medicine, the diabetes stays under control. What we do is that we don't stop the allopathic treatment. We continue with the same treatment and we start introducing an Ayurvedic medicine for it. When we start introducing the Ayurvedic medicine for it, the sugar starts coming down gradually. It's not that you take the medicine and 2 ghante mein baith gaya. It doesn't work like that. It starts coming down gradually by not increasing the dose. So we are not suppressing it, we're actually removing it. Okay, now it depends on every person's diabetes at how, to what extent can we remove it or reduce it. So it starts reducing. When it starts reducing, we start removing the allopathic medicine by a tapering form. So if you're taking 1,000 mg of metformin, for example, in a certain period of time, your sugar starts coming to a range where you can now reduce from 1,000 to about say 750, to then to about say 500, to about 250 metformin. And there could be a time where you can actually completely cut off metformin and stay on Ayurveda. And there can also be a time where you can cut off everything, and by following Ayurveda, you can actually cure diabetes. Why do I say this? And when I say this, I'm saying it with full responsibility. The reason for this is that Ayurveda, as I told you before, treats with ahar, vihar, achar, and vichar. When it comes to diabetes, it's not always a problem in your diet. It could be a problem with your exercise. It could be a problem with your thoughts. So in Ayurveda, when we look at everything together, we correct your lifestyle. We give you a diet. We give you medicines. We give you yoga asanas. We tell you what to do. So we are actually treating you in a very, very holistic way, and which is why you can actually overcome diabetes, keep it under control for the rest of the life, as long as you follow a correct lifestyle. Obviously, then if you start munching on sweets and expect your diabetes to be under control, and if that is what cure is for you, then I'm sorry, no one can do that for you. Okay, so that is diabetes. What about cancer treatment? I've already told you that we don't consider cancer, at least I don't consider cancer and autoimmune diseases to be too different from each other. They're brother and sister, because that is where ahankar, or your identification of yourself to the body and the body to the cells, is broken. There are rogue cells that are multiplying without really helping the body. That's exactly what cancer is. Now this rogue cells can spread, causing metastasis, or they can stay in one particular cocoon, causing neoplastic kind of cancers, right, which are benign. They don't really, sorry, I confused that. Okay, anyways, so they could be malignant or it could be benign, right? So cancer treatments is possible in Ayurveda. Theoretically speaking, there are multiple cancer hospitals also that are very successful. There was a bestseller book that was written by a US citizen who came to India, specifically in Valsad, Gujarat. got treatment from there and wrote a very famous book. It was a bestseller, of course, called How a Cow Cured Cancer. And there are successful cases of cancer being treated by Ayurveda. But cancer is not something that you take Ayurveda, theek ho jaoge. It's a very complex disease, and the chances of it getting cured are also dependent on multitudes of uh, parameters. Speaking for me personally, I don't look at cancer patients. I don't treat cancer patients, neither do I claim to. Ayurveda probably may treat cancer patients, but I don't delve into this. Can Ayurveda cure kidney failure? So we can try to activate the kidney with our medicines, and we've been successful in activating kidneys for quite a few patients. If it's complete failure, then of course we also can't help. Ayurveda is not some kind of a magical system of treatment, but we do provide a lot of beautiful herbs that can help you. Can we go paralysis treatment under Ayurveda? Patient having left side not work. If it's absolutely paralyzed, it's very difficult to get it back. If it's very newly paralyzed, the higher the chance. If it is, the more recent it is, the more later it is, the lower the chance. We have beautiful medicines for nerves, which is why Ayurveda is famous for paralysis, Parkinson's, any sort of nerve diseases. Ayurveda has always been famous for it because we have beautiful herbs that treat it. In fact, Panchakarma is also a beautiful mode of treatment when it comes to nerve diseases. Now, whether a full paralysis is curable or not is debatable because, again, like cancer, many factors come into play, but it's not a very good disease to have. I mean, it's a doctor will not be able to tell you, ha, ho jayega. That's not how it works. What is Amvat? What kind of food to not eat? It occurs unbearable pain in hand and neck. Amvat is very simple to what we call as a rheumatic arthritis. Okay, RA. Amvat is a case where you have a constant indigestion, again, not constipation, indigestion that is causing a lot of gas in the body, and that those toxins that are formed due to indigestion mix in the blood over a certain limit of tolerance. That causes Amvat, to keep it in a very simple form. Ayurveda can help you tremendously in RA or in Amvat. And of course, it is a painful problem. RA is not a small disease when it comes to pain. Precautions that you can take, the first thing you can do is home remedies. Okay, I can probably tell you a few. Home remedies will not cure it though, but precautions, you should start eating light and ensure that the body has enough time. Fasting works very well for Amvat. A person who fasts now allows the body to digest the previously undigested food will help. If there is severe pain in the calf muscle, what is the cure in Ayurveda? Pain is a symptom. I need to know why the pain is there for me to ascertain how I can cure it. It could be because of, say, diabetes. High sugar can cause calf pain. It could be because of probably a blood clot there, which could either turn out to be very serious or very okay. It could have varicose veins, and varicose veins could cause these kind of pains. It could merely be in a cramp kind of a problem where blood supply isn't really reaching the amount we want, or exercise is much more than the blood supply, causing anaerobic respiration and lactic acid formation. So it depends on what the problem is. It could be a vata problem, it could be a vata rakta problem, it could be an amavata problem. So depending on the reason, we can easily get it cured. Can we get the name of the medicine for BP? I normally don't recommend you trying home treatments. I'll be very happy to help you with the name, but please do it. If the name is Sarpagandha, but please do it under the guidance of a doctor. No, please don't do it on your own. If BP drops and no one is around, you could fall into a really big mess. The cure and reason for calf pain, I just told you. Depending on the reason, we can cure it. Calf pain is a symptom. We don't do symptomatic treatments. If I were an allopathic doctor, I would tell you take a painkiller, you'll be okay. But that's not how we work. High creatinine, again coming back to the kidney problem. I probably have the second highest number of patients of high creatinine after diabetes. So diabetes is one of the patients where I have the maximum patients. High creatinine is a close second. We've been very successful in high creatinine, which is why word of mouth is spread very well. Medicines like Punarnava, Gokshur have historically proved to be very effective in kidney problems. High creatinine or high uric acid problems, water retention issues, swellings, all of these issues we've been very successful. Obesity. So obesity is also possible to, but we need to identify why obesity is there. WHO defines obesity as three things: increase in the number of fat cells, increase in size of fat cells, or both. If it is number of fat cells, you need to use fat burners and do such exercises. If it is size of fat cells, which means it's water retention, so we need to use things that remove the water retention. And if it is both, then we need to use both. A lot of times people have a lot of gas and bloating and consider itself to be obesity. because they fit the obesity into the BMR rule. My MD dissertation thesis was on obesity, so I have a lot to offer when it comes to obesity, which I can't do in a matter of a few minutes here. So I am extremely sorry. With folded hands, I apologize. I will not be able to go into too much details with obesity, but I can definitely tell you Ayurveda is it's very much possible to treat it, provided that I get a response from the other end. One last thing that I wanted to tell you, because okay, let me just answer the last question, and then one last thing that I wanted to tell you before I think I close down, because I think we are already running out of time if I'm not mistaken. Epilepsy treatment is possible in Ayurveda. It is not completely curable. There are a few people who claim to cure it, but I myself personally have never cured an epilepsy patient permanently, because it's very difficult to find out when it's cured or not. You can have an epilepsy stroke after 20 years, and I have not been in practice for so long to even ascertain that I can cure epilepsy. Maybe a person who's having strokes every 6 months is not having it for the past 4 years, but may have it in the fifth year. So I don't know when it's cured and when it's not. I think contact details I will share. I need to tell you the last three things. Now, this is where the entire crux of what I actually wanted to talk to you about of COVID comes to. Number one, I told you, I will give you practical, correct things that you can share within your WhatsApp groups of people who unfortunately couldn't stay or make it also on this conversation. The link of how you can figure out your Prakriti, point number one. Point number two, once you figure out your Prakriti, what home remedy should you do for COVID protection? Because it's the need of the hour. Okay, you can even share this information because it's free, it's helpful, and it's much better than the shotgun methods that you've been bombarded with. Okay. Point number three, right now in the world, like it or not, Ayurveda or organics has become the Jagat Guru of research when it comes to COVID. In India, there is one homeopathic medicine that has gone to clinical trial and four Ayurvedic medicines that have gone to clinical trial. That is in the common domain. Even in allopathy, there are not more than one or two medicines that have gone into clinical trial phases for long as I am aware. If there's something new happening right now, probably I don't know. Ayurveda has been followed in the as the chief mode of treatment in Goa. So Goa was probably the first one to become COVID free. In Madagascar, they've been using Ayurveda herb in the names of phyto treatments or plant-based treatments. They're using a lot of Ayurveda herbs, and Madagascar has also become COVID free. So everywhere in the world, be it Africa, be it South America, be it North America, Ayurveda has today become the go-to treatment for COVID. So what we have done here with connections to a lot of people in the Ministry of Ayush, and I am also in the panel to treat the COVID pandemic and with top IAS officers, IRS officers. We also have Aditya Thackeray in the WhatsApp group, and we have a lot of people there, and we're working very closely with a lot of governments, not just Maharashtra, etc. So we have two things that we've been coming up with. One medicine that we've come up with has three of the medicines out of the four medicines that have successfully reached the clinical trial phase of COVID that we are giving out to boost immunity for a general layman who's not able to figure out their prakriti and get into so much details. So like a blanket kind of a thing, like how a broad spectrum antibiotic works. So it's not an antibiotic though, but I'm just trying to explain. So we've come up with something that no one else has. Obviously, it's in the process of being manufactured because the demand is extremely high, and it's literally impossible for us to meet up with the supply. So it's not as if we need more people to demand it. I already have a demand, but seeing to the fact that I'm talking to you and you all have been kind enough to even consider a small person like me to come and talk to such an elite group, I would also wish you to get some benefit if you feel it's worthwhile. To get that medicine, it will be available in the matter of next 15 days. But I am not going to keep it aside for any single person. So what I'm going to be doing is I will share the number where you can simply place the order. Once it's out of stock, I don't have anything else. I will not be able to help you. Okay, I'll repeat, we're using 3 out of the 4 herbs that have been gone into clinical trials with this medicine, and we're standardizing it with the highest FDA approvals, getting every approval in place, and it's going to be out in about 2 weeks where you can simply order it. The second thing I want to tell you, and the last thing, is that there was a test that was conducted as Ayurveda in Rajasthan with 102 participants, including 9 members or 7 members. I'm not sure with my data here, who were from the Tablighi Jamaat Markaz that had come there. And after giving that Ayurvedic kada, all of them, all 102, turned out to be negative. Okay. So this was approved by the government of Rajasthan, and it was given to about 1.5 lakh police officers, etc. in Rajasthan. Through a lot of efforts of us, we've actually made it available to me. It's merely a 20 rupee kada. So if anyone is looking for taking the 20 rupee kada, it's only one kada per person. You don't have to take like 10 kadas for one person. It's basically 20 rupees per person. If you're also willing to take that kada, because I have it only for your use, obviously I'm not going to be taking any profit or X or Y or Z. I don't do that stuff in these kind of times. But if any one of you are interested, you can also take the kada along with this medicine. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm posting 4 things right now. My contact numbers for any other problem, my secretary's number for any way you would like to either take an appointment, or if you want to book the kada or the medicine that I've told you about. Okay, whoever books first will obviously get it first. And how many bottles you need? 1 bottle for 1 patient lasts 15 days. Okay. The third thing I'm going to be posting is the link where you can find out your prakriti. And the fourth thing that I'm going to be posting is what you need to do once you find out the prakriti in terms of home remedies for COVID. And with that, I conclude today's talk. If there's anything else that you would like me to say or ask, feel free to connect with me.
Sandeep sir, your voice is not coming.
Is it that I am not able to hear?
I'm audible to you, but Sandeep sir, I'm not audible to Sandeep sir mic.
All right. So should I wait for?
Hello.
Hello.
So you have mentioned all the details here.
So I think I mentioned almost everything here. Just the one last thing.
Yeah.
So what I want you to do is just write your name, number you already have,
Yeah.
name and the amount of bottles.
I will circulate this also in the group also, sir.
Please do that. 1 bottle lasts 15 days per person. Right. So this is something that I can offer you from everything of every knowledge that I have, and from every source that I do my research from whatever panel that I am on, either on Republic TV as the corona expert there, where they asked me questions related to the virus, or from the panel that the municipal commissioner had here, or from whatever source I have, jitna bhi jo saar hai, I have put it on the group. Now, whether you would like to use it, not use it, do what you have to do, and that I completely leave to you.
Thank you so much, sir. You have enlightened us on today's topic, that is the COVID and the Ayurveda, the treatment not as an alternative medicine. Thank you so much on behalf of the Rotary.
I think I have lost your voice as well. Is it my connection or are the others able
Club
to hear it?
of Mumbai North End. And you can hear me? I think so.
Okay, now I can hear you. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So thank you so much on behalf of the Rotary Club
Thank you.
of the Mumbai North End, as well as on behalf of the Law Chamber of Siddharth Moraka for enlightening us on today's topic, that is the Ayurveda, the treatment not as an alternative medicine. Thank you so much, sir. And thank
Thank
you
you
all the
very much.
participants of the who have participated in this Zoom meeting.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
thank you so much.
everyone to bear with me for so long. Even my wife is not able to bear with me for so long. So you people probably have a
It
lot
was
of
very
patience.
informative.
You guys are a great group. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor for me to be in front of you.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Take care, sir.
Thank
Yeah,
thank you.
bye. Bye.